It's nearly midnight over San Francisco as Air Canada 759 begins its final approach. For the pilots, it's the last routine landing of a long day. But tonight, the view below is dangerously deceptive. They are cleared for runway 28 right, which sits beside 28 left. However, runway 28 left is closed for maintenance. Its lights have been turned off. Expecting to see two parallel runways as usual, the pilots' brains play a trick on them. They misidentify the active runway as 28 left and mistake the illuminated taxiway beside it for their actual target, runway 28 right. On that very taxiway, 4 other airliners are lined up and waiting for departure. United Flight 1, a Boeing 787, Philippine Airlines 115, an Airbus 340, and 2 additional United flights. In total, this means over 1,000 passengers are sitting directly in the path of the descending Air Canada jet. Information about the runway closure was published in a document known as a NOTAM, a Notice to Airmen, that details exceptional circumstances for a flight. The problem is, these documents are notoriously long, often running for many pages, making it difficult to pick up the most critical details. The Air Canada flight crew had simply missed it. Compounding this, the pilots had been cleared for a visual approach, which means they were permitted to line up with the runway manually, steering the plane based entirely on what they could see. With clear weather, a visual approach is the normal procedure, but since landings on incorrect runways or even taxiways have happened before, prudent pilots will always back up what they see with instrument guidance. In this case, they could have used the Instrument Landing System, or ILS, for runway 28 right to get a clear confirmation that they were on the correct path. To activate the ILS, a specific frequency for that runway has to be entered into the navigation receiver. While modern flight computers can do this automatically, this approach required it to be dialed in manually. For some reason, this step was never taken by the first officer. The crew had endured a long day. Having flown from Toronto, their body clocks were already at 3 a.m. This oversight, along with others, has since been attributed to a dangerous mix of overconfidence and fatigue. Adding to the problem, pilot fatigue rules in Canada at the time were less strict than US regulations, and the flight's captain had gone 19 hours without a significant rest period. But because nobody recognized the airplane was lined up for the taxiway, Air Canada headed closer and closer towards a catastrophe. The standard flight path for the visual approach at this airport comes in at a slight angle from the right, a procedure designed to keep planes farther away from the bay shore to reduce noise pollution. Therefore, from the control tower's perspective, it's not unusual for an aircraft to look a little off-center to the left of the runway centerline. This normal appearance helped to mask the critical error as Air Canada descended upon the taxiway, about to crash into the parked planes. Sensing that something was off, the pilots sought reassurance, keying the mic.
And Tower, just want to confirm this Air Canada 759, we see some lights on the runway there. Across the runway, can you confirm a clear to land?
Voice recordings from that moment reveal a crucial 5-second delay before the controller answered.
Air Canada 759, confirmed clear to land runway 28 right. There is no one on 28 right, flight you.
At this time, only one controller was managing all the traffic. While a separate ground controller normally handles ground movements during quieter hours, the tower controller often works both frequencies alone. Listening in on this exchange were the pilots of United Flight 1, waiting first in line on taxiway Charlie. They could see the approaching aircraft and were likely wondering why it was still positioned so far to the left of the runway's center line. As it became obvious the plane was heading directly for the taxiway, the United pilot spoke up, dropping his own call sign to save every possible second. His urgent voice cut across the radio.
Where's this guy going? He's on the taxiway.
Air Canada, go around.
In the go-around, Air Canada 759.
What had just occurred could have been the largest disaster in aviation history. The Air Canada jet missed the tail fins of the planes on the ground by only a few meters.
759, looks like you were lined up for Charlie there. Flight heading 280, climb maintain 3000.
Heading 280, 3000, count 759.
United 1, Air Canada flew directly over us.
Yeah, I saw that, guys.
Footage of the incident shows just how frighteningly close the planes really were, triggering a full investigation by the National Transportation Safety Board. In its wake, the NTSB released an entire list of recommendations, which led to immediate changes. Visual approaches at night are now prohibited at San Francisco anytime an adjacent runway is shut down. Furthermore, 2 air traffic controllers are now required to be on duty until the late-night arrival rush has ended. The incident was a powerful lesson on the dangers of miscommunication at airports, but whether those lessons were truly learned is now being questioned, as recent years have seen a worrying number of close calls at U.S. airports.
A close call at JFK Airport when 2 planes nearly collided on the runway.
The FAA and NTSB are investigating a near collision of 2 planes at the Austin Bergstrom International Airport on Saturday. Tonight, the FAA is investigating another close call at a U.S. airport. Well, tonight, the FAA has launched an investigation into yet another near collision of 2 aircraft, this one at Boston Logan International Airport.
On January the 13th, 2023, a near catastrophe unfolded at JFK Airport in New York City. American Airlines Flight 106 was taxiing along taxiway Bravo, making its way to the departure end of runway 4 left for takeoff. The crew was instructed to taxi via Bravo and then make a turn onto Kilo.
670 Kennedy right on there, 4 left, taxi left, Bravo, hold short of Kilo.
Over 30 Kilo, American, 106.
It's important to point out that the pilot only acknowledged the taxi route in his readback, completely omitting the runway assignment. This was a minor deviation from protocol, but the controller simply dismissed it, a decision that would prove dangerous. At about the same time the American jet reached that intersection, Delta Airlines Flight 1943 was ready for takeoff on runway 4 left and received its final clearance.
Delta 1943, wind 35018, gust 24, runway 4 left, clear for takeoff.
Clear for takeoff, runway 4 left, Delta 1943.
Meanwhile, American Airlines 106 was continuing its taxi as instructed, approaching the required turn at Kilo. But instead of turning right onto Kilo, the pilots continued straight ahead onto taxiway Juliet. This action put their aircraft directly across the very same runway on which the Delta flight was now accelerating for departure. Why the crew of the American Airlines flight proceeded straight ahead remains unclear. One possible explanation is habit. JFK often uses runway 31 left for departures, so the pilots may have been mentally locked into a familiar taxi routine. This dangerous assumption was likely reinforced by the weather conditions. The wind was 340 degrees at 18 knots, with gusts to 24, which would have strongly favored a departure from runway 31 left. For its own operational reasons, however, the airport was using runway 4 left that day. Also noteworthy is that the 2 flight crews were completely unaware of each other. American 106 was communicating on the ground frequency, while Delta 1943 was on the tower frequency. They were speaking to different controllers, so neither of them knew about each other's actions. Thankfully, just seconds after the error occurred, the tower controller noticed the developing situation and reacted exceptionally well.
American 106 Heavy, I'm running 106 Heavy, hold position. American 106 Heavy, hold position.
Delta 1943, cancel takeoff plans. Delta 1943, cancel takeoff plans. Rejecting.
All right, and Delta 1943.
The Delta plane screeched to a halt about 1,000 feet short of intersection Juliet. Thankfully, no one was injured. The U.S. Federal Aviation Administration grades these runway incursions based on their severity. Besides actual accidents, there are 4 categories, ranging from incidents where a collision was narrowly avoided down to errors that posed no security risk. The JFK event was considered serious enough to be classified as a Category B.
If you look at the last decade or so, you would see between 10 and 20 times a year typically that this would happen. This year we're on track to have more than 20, and even one is one that I would not like to see happen.
The media spotlight on airport safety after the JFK incident was intense. Yet it would take just 3 weeks for the next close call to occur. This one, arguably the most frightening of all. The setting is Austin in the early morning hours. FedEx Flight 1432, a Boeing 767 cargo plane arriving from Memphis, begins its approach. As is common in Austin, the ground is blanketed by a layer of fog. It's only about 1,000 feet thick, but incredibly dense. High above, the crew is in clear sky, but to land, they will have to descend into it.
Austin Tower, FedEx 1432 Heavy, passing 5.4 for that. Cat 3 ILS 18 left.
Due to the dense fog, FedEx 1432 was required to perform a Category 3 instrument approach. This is a procedure used in extremely low visibility, where the aircraft's auto-land system is engaged to fly the final approach and landing. The flight crew's role shifts to monitoring the systems to ensure they operate correctly. For an experienced crew, this maneuver in itself is entirely routine and nothing unusual.
FedEx 1432 Heavy, Austin Tower, 18 left, RVR, touchdown 1,400, midpoint 600, roll out 1,800, 18 left, clear to land.
To aid them, the tower controller provides the RVR, or Runway Visual Range, which measures visibility in feet at 3 key points: the touchdown zone, the midpoint, and the end of the runway. You will also hear the phrase passing 5.4, which is a distance call-out, meaning the plane is 5.4 miles from the ILS transmitter located at the runway's end. At this critical moment, Southwest Flight 708 checks in with the tower.
Tower, Southwest 708, we're short of 18 left, we're ready.
Southwest 708 Austin Tower, runway 18 left, RVR 1,200, midpoint 600, roll out 1,600. Flight heading 170, runway 18 left, clear for takeoff, traffic 3 mile final is a Heavy 767.
Okay, 170, cleared for takeoff, 18 left, copy the traffic, Southwest 708.
The controller's plan is to have the Southwest jet depart from the same runway before the FedEx plane lands. A 3 mile separation is usually considered a comfortable window to allow a departure to slip out. The advisory, "Traffic on 3 mile final is a Heavy 767, was meant to tell the Southwest crew to expedite their takeoff. But the process took longer than anticipated. Time was now critical, as the FedEx flight plunged into the dense fog layer, completely losing sight of the ground. Their distance to the runway had now closed to a mere 1.2 miles, and inside the cockpit, the crew was becoming nervous about the Southwest jet still on their runway.
Tower, confirm FedEx 1432 Heavy, clear to land on 18 left. FedEx 1432 Heavy, that is affirmative, 18 left, you are clear to land, traffic departure price around to 737. Roger.
A full 60 seconds have now passed since the tower gave Southwest 708 its takeoff clearance, and the jet is apparently still standing at the threshold. Although there is no fixed time limit for a takeoff roll, crews are expected to be prompt when another aircraft is on approach.
Southwest 708, confirm on the road. Rolling now.
Meanwhile, the FedEx jet is descending through the fog, the crew highly concentrated on spotting the first glimpse of the runway approach lights. At just 150 feet above the ground, the fog thins slightly. Through the haze, they can suddenly make out the lights of the Southwest 737 still on their runway, rolling forward, but moving very slowly. The FedEx pilots immediately initiate a go-around, simultaneously addressing the Southwest crew directly over the radio.
Southwest aboard. FedEx is on the go. Southwest 708, roger, you can turn right when able.
The tower's transmission was the result of a critical misunderstanding. The controller heard the abort call, but assumed it had come from Southwest, thinking they were cancelling their takeoff.
Negative.
The Southwest crew, however, was likely already past their V1 speed, the point of no return, where rejecting a takeoff becomes dangerous. Preoccupied with their departure, they simply replied negative. This brief exchange highlights just how rapidly a situation can become confusing for everyone involved. The two jets came within 100 feet of each other before the climbing FedEx plane was able to pull up and over the departing Southwest aircraft. Giving instructions to one aircraft crew is normally not allowed, but the fact that the FedEx pilots did shows just how severe the situation had become. After the tower controller sorted out the confusion, he took active control once more, giving instructions to both airplanes to ensure they remained separated.
1432, climb maintain 3000, whenever you can turn left heading 080.
With turn to 080 3000, FedEx 1432 Heavy.
Southwest 70, you can turn left heading 170. 170, 779.
Two aircraft should never come this close to one another. At the same time, this sequence of events also demonstrates that several critical safety procedures did work to prevent a collision. Whether it was by directly seeing the Southwest jet on the runway, or by receiving a warning from their TCAS, the Traffic Collision Avoidance System, the FedEx crew took timely and decisive action to stay clear of the other aircraft.
This 1432 Heavy, roger, sir. You have our apologies. We appreciate your professionalism.
Thank you.
In hindsight, was the risk worth it? The answer is probably no. At a time of very low traffic, a short 2-minute delay for Southwest 708 would have removed all stress and danger from the situation. On the other hand, Southwest pilots are known for their proficiency and fast takeoffs, and this exact type of departure clearance had worked perfectly thousands of times before. As for the ultimate question of responsibility, the full NTSB investigation has since determined the official findings in the case. Since the beginning of 2025, 8 serious runway incidents have been reported, 3 of which were immediately classified as Category B. This raises the difficult question of when a series of events stops being a statistical cluster and starts becoming a systematic problem. To some degree, the current media attention is simply shining a light on a danger that has always been present. Ultimately, every safety protocol exists to prevent a repeat of history, because if you look at a list of the deadliest aviation accidents ever, the number 1 spot is not held by a crash from high altitude, but by 2 planes colliding with each other on the runway. But what happens when the warnings come too late, when the clock is already ticking, when smoke creeps into the cockpit and every second becomes a decision that matters? That story is next. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more aviation stories.